what we call, this is where all of our decisions that impact student achievement are made. We meet twice a month for our PLCs, and that's where our teachers are able to bring data or bring concerns, and what we do is we look at them and we see what we can do to best meet the needs of our kids. And those are the reason that some of the things have changed this year during like our club times and things like that, because we're really trying to make sure that we do what's best for kids and meet all of their needs. So we've been doing this for the past 3 to 4 years, and I think each year it gets better, because it used to be where it was more of a directed from me. Now the teachers actually do most of the they decide what they need to do and what the needs of the kids are. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves, and then they'll begin. They'll act like you all are not here, and they will begin.
Hi, I'm Miss Taylor, Shelley Taylor. I teach writing and science for 5th grade.
Miss Chalaya, Brenda Chalaya, and I teach social studies in 5th grade. Hi.
Adrienne Matson, and I teach reading in 5th grade.
Jacob Eason, and I teach math in 5th grade.
And I guess before we can begin, we introduce everybody else so you kind of know who else is in the room. We have parents and we have the community. So if you want to start.
I'm Lori Duncan. I have 2 children here at Stopher. I'm a parent and part of the PTA board.
I'm Xana Wiseman. I have a 2nd grader and a kindergartner, and I'm also on the PTA board.
I'm Kara Joyce. I have 3 kids here, and I'm also on the PTA board.
I'm Nicole Heimgartner, and I have twin 5th graders here, and I'm also on the PTA board.
John Marshall, Chief Equity Officer for Jefferson County Public Schools. Thank you all for coming.
Delquan Dorsey, probably got email from me on a phone call. Community Engagement Coordinator for Diversity, Equity, Poverty, JCPS.
Shauna Stanton, SBDM Specialist, Jefferson County Public Schools.
Lawrence Woven, Louisville Urban League, and a proud parent of 2 children here at
Rose Livingston, retired administrator for Jefferson County Public Schools. Actually had the honor to work with the principal's daughter at Ballard High School. Currently, they're working with a few of your students in what's called the Beach, which is a community educational presence down in Beecher Terrace. I'm the executive director. Wow. And thank you for inviting me.
Warren Shelton, executive director of Jefferson County Association School Administrators, and a grandparent of a Stopher grad.
And my name is Katie Thomas. I'm the Goal Clarity Coach here at Stopher. So I work really closely with the teachers with curriculum and instruction and data and all the fun things like that. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and get started. You all have just taken your first proficiency, so everybody should have their results. And what I wanted to do first is just do, an overview. Since everybody's departmentalized, if you could just share with your team, what are some of the strengths, what are some of the areas of concern that you all had from this first proficiency? Jacob, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I was pretty pleased overall with our results. I came from a school where the results weren't quite this high ever, so I was pretty, surprised to see. And overall, we had about 70% proficient distinguished. Actually, I'm sorry, it's more closer to 80% proficient distinguished. So that was pretty good. As far as our ERQs go, math ERQs are a little bit different than the other ERQs. Math ERQs are a lot about, you have to be able to understand the problem, but then you have to be able to do the math correctly. And so when kids miss them, it's one of those 2 things. Typically, it's more of a calculation error. They usually are understanding what the question's asking, but they made a calculation error somewhere. And so we have to, take time to look at that. But we had, out of 4 on the ERQ, at a 3.68 average, so that's pretty high. And then it covered 4 different topics. It covered multiplication and division strategies. We had 84% correct on those. Representing algebraic thinking, that's like order of operations things, being able to read a word problem or situation and come up with an expression that matches. Had about 84% correct on that one. Our lowest was understanding volume. We had about 78% on that, and so I know just looking at the questions, we just had some misconceptions that we're going to go back and we've actually addressed a little bit already. We're going to be continuing to address them throughout the year, but it's kind of cool. We had our Dare to Care drive, and all the boxes are out in the hallway set up in a big rectangular prism. And so I showed the pictures quickly to the kids, and they estimated, and then we actually went out and found the volume of that thing. I know. People laugh at me, but I'm always thinking about, how can we use the math in the real world? Because, whoever is in charge of that, they actually told me, they said, I had to figure out how many boxes they had for Dare to Care, and I had to call Dare to Care to tell them that. And so I expressed that to the kids. I said, this is how you would use it in the real world. This is something that you actually would do. And then the last part was building a mathematical community with foundational focus, and there were a couple questions from 4th grade. They had about 90% correct on that. So overall, good results. We have kids that we're going to identify that we need to work a little bit more with, but volume kind of overall is what we're going to take a look at as well.
Volume spirals in every cycle, so that's something that is not finalized right now. All right, Ms. Metzen.
Okay. Again, I was fairly pleased with the results of ours as well, or the reading one as well. I guess the biggest thing that stuck out to me when I was looking at the difference between the multiple choice scores and the ERQ scores, the highest key focus topic, or the highest percentage correct, was the main ideas, theme, key details, and summarizing. However, our ERQ was also on theme, and there was a kind of a discrepancy between the multiple choice was high for that, but the ERQ, we had 66 kids who did not score a 4 on the ERQ. So looking at how they can better answer the ERQ, and it's clear they understand theme because they were able to get the multiple choice right, but
they can't write about it.
Right, exactly. They couldn't get the 4 on the ERQ. So.
It's not just identifying the theme, it's being able to write about what you identify.
Well, and then going back and what from the text
evidence from the
proves,
text. Yes.
proves. And I'll tell you, as we were looking at those ERQs, if they did not cite evidence from the text, it was not a 4. So that's a simple fix for a lot of them.
Which they don't need to do in mine.
And they do for me.
Right.
Can't for you.
Right, so it's confusing.
Which is extremely confusing.
Yeah. So that's something we'll have to address. All right, you want to go ahead and talk about yours?
Yes.
Your proficiency?
Multiple choice, I'm doing well. I think that we have been attacking that for several years, and I think that the 80% of them scored proficient or distinguished.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to that ERQ, 2.46 average, and then only 19 with a 4. So, and mine's completely different. And taking your proficiency and then moving to mine, and then heading over to you, and then having to do you. I just think that.
Especially when they're only days apart.
They're days apart, so that's just too confusing. And it's for their brains to be able to say, how can we've got to figure out a plan for that.
Well, not only the ERQs, but then it falls over into on-demand writing, where if it's passage-based, they need evidence. If it's a standalone prompt, then they're just going to have to answer that. And I do not want I think, or I know this because.
And I do not want I think.
Yes. So it's hard for them to just have to put their hat.
And I know this because I don't I think, but.
Yeah.
You want I know because, so it's language.
It's all back to you.
It's
so
language.
It's all in the language.
Yeah.
Okay.
So developing a plan for that, and then sharing the plan with the staff, because if they're not learning it, I know they're doing ERQs in 2nd grade. I know they're doing them, just from parent experience, and making sure we're all talking the same talk and walking the same walk.
I know in 4th grade they're just starting the ERQs in math in 4th grade, so that they're using a strategy, and I shared that with you, the acronym they're using. And I think for reading you all still use RACE. Okay, but that doesn't work. Okay.
RA works, CE does not.
I don't want anything to do with race.
I don't want
to. So how,
not to organize.
Do you want to talk about your science, or do you want to stick with this writing for right now?
I guess for their purposes, our goal is to definitely prepare them for middle school and to be able to answer these questions. And I think it is similar to social studies in a sense that they are going to have to go back and really rely on the information that they've learned and pull from that and be able to explain. This was a very challenging unit. I was at 70% proficient distinguished, but it's a new unit for us. They've taken a unit that I've had before and moved it to middle school, and they've moved this one down. So, it's conservation of matter, chemical reactions, structures, properties of matter. It was just very difficult, and trying to fit all that material in without really also experimenting and get their hands on a lot of these things. I think it was just a very hard, very challenging unit for them. So, overall, we did okay. We had 64% proficient distinguished on the ERQ. So they're working really hard. They're trying, and we're getting through the material. But also it came down to how to attack it, how to get it down, and what they need to put in there. And again, we're noticing that it just looks very different across the board.
Okay.
And so what works here may not be there. And it's not to confuse them in a sense, but really it's going to be that way from now on. You just have different hats. If, you know, we kind of talk about that with the audience, you know, who are you writing to and what is that task and what is your purpose for that? And that's what you're going to have to do, is put on this hat to answer this ERQ and this hat to put on this, you know.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it's for that, I think we've hit upon that for the first time, to say we need a solution for them to be able to see the difference in what they can do, because that's huge, being able just to know how to
Because
do
it's
that.
clear they know the standard that the question's
Definitely.
asking. They just don't know how to successfully. So let's talk about
What it's
how
gonna look
are we
like.
go, yeah, let's do a systems thing.
Yeah,
here.
I
How are we
think-
gonna fix this?
I think they need the same language.
Okay.
I think they need something that is concrete for them to look at and to practice with. Just like we used, I mean, when I taught writing, it was the writing toolbox and having that toolbox up and having it, you know, pulling the same tools. So what is it going to look like? And if we have to fifth down and say this is what it's going to look like, because we're the ones that are tested in 4 areas, using that same language. So I don't know, how long has race been? 2 years, 3 years?
At least 2.
Okay. So starting with race because it's already out there. So
Does that work for you?
I like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I feel
Absolutely.
like school-wide, that's what everybody's doing, and people are
yeah.
people are teaching it pretty hard. And I think the kids know they have to cite. I just think they didn't.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Right, and I think if we
And it gets
base it on
confusing
that,
because they know
Right.
not to cite
Right.
for you, but just,
and
you know.
I mean, I had someone say, "Is this race? Do I do this?" I mean, it's just their little brains are saying, "I'm
Right.
writing again.
Yeah.
Am I using this? Am I not using this?" So coming up with, I want to touch that board so bad. Like coming up
Yeah.
with something that
An
would,
anchor chart where they have the 4
Yes.
subject areas. Yeah.
Yes.
And for those of you, race is a way to answer the extended response questions. So do you wanna explain that really quickly?
Yeah, it's a poster we have on the wall. They all have it in their notebooks. They've learned it, you know, or all the way up. But it's rephrase is the R, answer is the A, cite your evidence is the C, and then the poster has, you know, some little transitions to start that, and then explain your evidence is the E, and then they repeat the C and the E if it's an ERQ, if it's an SRQ, they just do the RACE.
And they practice this. I mean,
Yes.
3rd grade is the first time that they're exposed to short answer questions in reading. And so from 3rd grade on, this is what is being taught. So I feel like
And they know, they'll even ask, sometimes it'll
If
just.
you want to tell, because everybody doesn't know ERQs.
oh,
I think we should read something. And we're the wrong right now.
an extended response, an ERQ is an extended response question. It typically goes at the end of a proficiency. A proficiency is just a test that the kids are taking at the end of a 8-week period. Covers a lot, it covers everything, and we just kind of gauge where they are. A short answer is just half of that, would you say?
you typically write 2 to 3 sentences.
Yes, and an ERQ, I mean, for social studies, you know, is
2 to 3 parts.
2 to
So
3
like part
parts. It's
part B,
A,
part
it'll
C.
identify a Native American group, and their the language is what is so difficult with that, and their physical environment, and then name an artifact and how they use their physical environment to adapt to that. Hers will be based on a passage.
For this one, it was the part A was summarize the passage, and then part B was identify a key point in the passage and explain how that relates to the theme of the text.
And math is usually a little different than that. They get a scenario. In this case, it was somebody who was making 28 dozen cookies for just for their school. And so part A was what number is equivalent to 28 dozen. And then part B, you had to have gotten part A right to get part B correct. Part B was if they are splitting those cookies in between the 56 fifth graders, how many cookies will each fifth grader get? And so it's just checking the multiplication and division. But sometimes it's hard, you know, if they have to get part A right, they could do all the math correct on part B and divide that number correctly. But if they had the answer for part A wrong, then they automatically get B.
And that I think that's the same too.
Same for me as
when you
well.
end up picking a different group that's not that group, and then not even naming their physical environment, you can't pick a.
And that was a lot of yours.
that was a
So
lot
we were
of them.
looking at yours. A lot of them answered the question on like colonization or something. I mean,
Yeah,
it was what they
but
were.
that's the part of the proficiency that's difficult for U.S. history
Yes.
is it could be something, Native Americans was, what, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago?
Right.
And I've moved on to the colonies and the conflict between the Native Americans and but the ERQ goes back. So it's that recall and remembering. I mean, I teach from the beginning of dawn till today, or actually, 2016 election. And so it's just putting all that in your brain. But I think that their little brains are exploding too. We talk about how 4 different classrooms, 4 different sets of grandparents, and figuring out what they can do. So how they can answer these and how we can give them a heads up.
What would work for social studies? Is that something
RA.
So
I think RA works. Do you not think it works for
So-
science? RA being restate and answer
From the race.
from the race. So using that same, I don't want to give them something else to learn. I don't want to give them another acronym to put in their head.
And I don't either, but for me, it's different. They had they actually had an illustration. It was bag A and bag B, and it was what's going on in bag A versus bag B. So no, not really restating. That's what I mean. It doesn't really work for them. They're going to have to say, what's going on in bag A? Why are there bubbles? Okay, well, it's gas, and that's part of the matter. And then they're going to go into part B and explain that. So it is very different. And I don't know that every proficiency will necessarily be like that, but it's looking at something and being able to explain it in that way, not really, I know this because, or, they need to state this is the type of property, this is how I know that, but in a way that pulls from the information they've learned before. So restating doesn't really work for that, and on demand's just a whole nother.
Well, so for on demand, I was going to ask you for on demand. Do you do the WWF?
No.
Okay.
No, I have.
That is who is the audience? What's the form? And
I don't even know anymore because the kids couldn't remember which W went where.
Right. I know. Well, we can't either. So you have a different one.
Yes.
What do you use for the
We have
on
Taffman. Silly as it sounds, it was around Halloween, and I saw a little piece of taffy. And I went to school the next day, and I'm kind of, I said, oh, well, who can have Taffman? I gave him a cape and eyes, and next thing I know, I have superhero Taff. And I said, well, maybe that'll help us remember task, audience, and form.
Okay.
Well, lo and behold, the next few days I saw little TAF babies and TAF cheerleaders and TAF camos, and
Amazing.
but it helped them remember
Okay.
their task, their audience, and their form.
Task.
And
Okay.
so that's something we're working very hard. You have to know what is your task. Is it opinion? Is it inform? Is it explain? Are you giving a narrative? And then who are you writing to? Because it's going to look very differently if you're writing to your friend or to the mayor. And then the form is, if you get that incorrect, then, I tell them, forget it, hang it up, you're done. So it's that important. TAF has to be there in the form. Could be essay, it could be speech, and all of those are going to look so very differently. So for me, it just doesn't work to say that, because whatever piece, there's, I don't know the combination, you could probably figure it out for fun, but the combination of the TAF, what the forms that you can have with all those different tasks and audience, and they just have to be able to pull that. They have to be able to pull from their writing toolbox. And if it's opinion, you're going to state that. You're going to have a thesis statement. I don't want to think. I tell them it's very weak. Be strong. Own your opinion. You're going to state it. You're going to own it. You're going to support it. You're going to back it up. So for me to say rephrase, I don't want them. I think, or I know this because Ms. Taylor said, or I think that no. What's your opinion?
Yes.
And go with it.
My
So
favorite.
it just looks very different.
Because Miss Chalaya in class, blah, blah, blah.
My favorite is math. I counted it up on my fingers,
No.
or I used the how do you know your answer? I used a calculator. Like, no, that's not what we want.
So I know it frustrates them, and we're working really hard. I've
Okay.
definitely gone at a slower pace this year for on demand, and we've had days. I actually had a homework where they just went home, and I said, just identify the task, the audience, and the form for me. Just because if you don't have that, everything else, you can be an excellent writer, and they are. We already have the skills. It's making sure that you're doing what they're asking you to do in the right form. Period. So
Okay.
it's just very different, and it's very different for science too. So
Okay, so we don't really have anything for science then. So
not necessarily, no.
Okay.
And
Is
I mean,
there a passage, like, the part above the A, the question?
well, it
STEM.
will say, not really.
Yeah.
It will just.
STEM. That's what I was called.
For this
STEM.
one, it had 2 bags. And really what happened, they have baking soda and then they have vinegar. And this one is baking soda and water. Well, you're going to have a reaction, which is your chemical reaction, and why. And you know that, well.
But there was no scenario before that.
Mm-mm.
the scenario, I guess, was
Because I was
just a
trying to think,
picture.
like, sometimes mine has, although it might be just, identify a certain group, it has almost like a little paragraph that I tell them to steal from. I say, steal the language from there.
Because normally in social, it'll say, it'll give like some background information.
Yeah, it's a little bit of
Yeah.
background, and I'd
Yeah.
say take from that, steal from that. But if it's,
I mean, in a
was
sense,
just
yes,
trying
it's
to
more
think of
maybe
a
vocabulary.
commonality.
My look-fors were, did they say there is a chemical reaction?
Okay.
Did, is the word gas there? Those are the bubbles, it's the gas, and
Mhm.
there's not a reaction here. And so it's more of, maybe more vocabulary or concepts, and overall concepts, I guess, in a sense, not really.
I wonder if that's something that we can research more.
And I was just thinking to maybe talk to Ms. Kepler, because she's
Yeah.
fantastic, great,
Yeah.
and see, I know they're starting in 4th grade and how they're attacking those. And again, this is a new unit, so it was very different for all of us, and it's a lot, chemical
Okay.
and physical reactions for, it was just challenging.
So let me ask you this: if we're making an anchor chart, do we want only the reading, social studies, on-demand writing, or do we want to put science on that chart too?
I think we can. I think I just
Okay.
need to try really hard to, what does that look like? And maybe even come to you
I
guys.
think
and
if we're
bring
gonna
and look
use
at
it, if we're gonna try to start it in 5 through, I think we need to have all of them on there.
Okay.
Because then it's something that they're so used to, that if they're starting in 3rd grade and they're saying, okay, this is how, I've seen this before, I've done this before, I can put that,
Okay.
I can make that make sense as they're working their way up. Because, I mean, we're not losing kids, they're staying with us.
Right. Okay. For math, I know in 4th grade we are using, it's either ACE or APE. Answer the question, prove your answer, and then sentence. So you have to state your answer in a sentence. Are you using something similar to that?
I am using selfie
Okay.
because.
Of course you are.
These poor
You know.
children.
See, we got too much. Yeah. Okay.
Well, they
that's why I wanna
remember it,
streamline
it, yeah.
so it does basically the same thing. Show your
Okay.
work, explain your work, or explain your answer. Lots of math vocabulary used.
Okay.
Those types of things. Eliminate the careless errors, that kind of thing. I'm fine with switching it up to APE, especially if we're going to do that 3rd through 5th. If that's going to be like a
I know. Well,
standard
yeah.
thing.
So 3rd and 4th are doing that. Let me see. I have so many acronyms in my head.
I know,
I remember what
and I-
everything stands for. I
Which,
know
you know,
A
and
is.
that's how the kids probably feel.
That's
Okay,
how
I'm
I'm
sure.
sure.
Yeah,
Letting them
absolutely.
see it, yeah.
So A is answer the question. Okay. P is prove your answer using pictures, words, or numbers. E is explain your answer in a sentence. So we said, when we were grading the 4th grade responses, if they did not have a sentence explaining their answer, we did not give them full
Oh,
credit.
you got to have a sentence. Definitely.
Because you will get this box with numbers all in it,
Mm-hmm.
and you may see the right answer, but you have no idea if they actually, so it makes things much easier
And
if
if
they
it
can
does,
just
and
say.
if they just put a number, they're not really relating it back to the context,
Correct.
which is the whole idea behind an ERQ, is that you are able to solve math in the context of a real world situation.
Correct. Okay. So then we will talk more about which one to use, and
I'm fine with
maybe
it.
in vertical teams we could talk about which one might be better, and we can do that shortly. So okay. So then the next thing would be talk to Keckler and get some science language, and then make a poster that we can start using 3rd through 5th.
Absolutely. I think that
Okay,
would
so I
be
can
great.
do, I can work on that. We also have Gold Day coming up, so that's something that we can really revisit then.
Yes, I think that the language, and even if each one of them had similar language, I don't know how to pull it together. We have the E here, the explanation, just trying to get them to use the same, if there's one common thread between the 5 subjects that they can grasp a hold of, even if they know I always have to do this in every one. Is there?
Explain would be the only one,
Yeah.
but then on demand, you may not be explaining if it's
a narrative.
So I mean,
Yeah.
And I've had I've had kids confused to the point where they gave me 3 reasons in a narrative. I thought, whoa,
bless
this
their
is a
heart, like they're
story.
trying
Right.
so
No, they're
hard
trying,
to,
yeah. But if, I'm trying to think
I
of
know.
someone who, if that's overwhelming for them and they are struggling, what can we do for the kid who just needs one direction every time they sit down and write? That we can then grow on that, make, as they're moving up. But what is going to be the common thread? We've got to find it and figure out
I
how to
almost
help
wonder if
them.
it could be possibly a common notebook. I know as crazy as that sounds, almost like the data folders that we have.
Okay.
Just something where they have, maybe an example of a 4, and then they have that organization, they have that, I don't know, that graphic for each of the 4. Maybe there's a practice, or I don't know, and somehow, some way that
What if we
they
put that on
know
a
that they
separate
can-
chart? Like we could blow that up, like take students, say like a 4 from everybody, type it up, and that way they could see what the 4 would look like at each level.
Mhm.
I'd hate to put that on this chart though,
Yeah,
'cause
I
it would
think-
clutter
yeah,
it
that'd
up,
be
but
too
maybe that
much.
should be a set, or
Right.
it could be a notebook.
It could
the
be
kid,
the way to introduce the anchor chart.
Could
I
be.
mean, it could be a way, I mean, you're
Could be.
highlighting the R, the A, the P, the M, the K. the-
Or just in a sense, really analyzing the four. Even,
Oh, absolutely.
Just to
Yeah.
see the differences and talk about maybe their.
Did you do that already?
Mhm.
Okay, with
Yeah.
that one.
I did my 4. I went from 0 up to 4 to show them.
Did the
what-
kids see?
Yeah, they saw it.
They saw the differences. I mean, they were able to talk about
I
that.
just think with this, with social studies, it's you know it or you don't. I mean, if you can't think of a Native American group, or if you pick the Native American group in that little scenario, if you can't think of something or remember a physical environment, or a physical environment trips you up on the vocabulary and you're not sure.
Maybe you could have shown them a 1, 2, 3, and 4 where they got the right answer, but they still scored a 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's like it was built up that way.
Something that was interesting, a lot of my kids were surprised, like kids who filled the whole page, they were like, they got a 0, they got a 1, you know? They filled the whole
I
page
know.
though, you know? But
And I
it's
tell
looking
Yeah,
at
my
the
one
words, not
0
what's
that you
in
came and
that
talked to me
word.
about. That
And it, like, because you look at it, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to read this. And then I'm like,
Right.
what? And I mean, so I went back to the teacher, I'm like, did you? What?
But also, the thing about ERQs is I want it to be also, it is a testing strategy, it is a way to test. We also are teaching them to be writers. So how can we relate it to real life and they're not gonna have to go somewhere and answer ERQs. I mean, they have to be able to be, they have to be.
I know.
And I do like on demand for that. A lot of changes. I mean, it really is real world writing.
The
It really
standalone,
is.
especially.
You know, to state your opinion, and I start with asking the kids, you know, when's the last time an adult asked you your opinion? Never. We don't. And so for them to express their opinion and really support it and back it up, and
they're loving the voting.
it's awesome.
yeah.
I mean, it's a
They
good
are.
to see them, and they want to debate, and they
Right.
oh, I've got this, you know, and they get very excited about it, and then and I struggle too with giving them models of writing. They were struggling with this last one that we did, and it was an opinion piece. Maybe it's the trick or treating, but I wrote one for them. I thought, well, I'm just gonna write one, and I'm gonna see. And so of course I gave it to the first one. She said, well, can I read yours? And so she read. She said, that's good. I said, well, thank you. Yes. So maybe they need to see more, but I always struggle with that because you know when you color a brown dog on the board, you say, okay, go. You're gonna get
Everybody-
24 brown dogs.
Exactly.
Right.
So I'm always struggle with, you know, do I give them that? But
I would give it to them after the fact.
Yeah.
So like after you
and maybe the next one.
after you do a piece, you know, either write one yourself or pull a kid who did an exceptional job. You know, take the name off. You can type it up, whatever. But let them see, and that way they have that model in their head for the next
Right.
one.
I hate to interrupt this really much. Believe it or not, this is not, I mean, this is what they do. And they're very passionate about it, but I know they want some questions and answers, so
Absolutely.
I know.
Well, we can continue this on Gold Day because
Yeah,
I know we've got a lot
And I want to
on
talk
our schedule.
to third and
Yeah,
fourth
yeah.
about the language
we
and
can
the
talk about that.
commonality.
Dr. Owens, may I start with the first
Oh,
one?
absolutely.
One of the questions that you asked is actually sits directly in my department, and I'm glad you spoke to it. And a lot of times you'll hear that, well, there's not kids out here that need to know the question, that need to be addressed with the question. You said, what can we do for the kids that need more? I would like for y'all to talk about that more because sometimes there's this, or we're out here and there aren't kids out here that need more. What do parents that have kids out here that need more, what is offered and what do you all do as a PLC group?
Do you mean
Because
more
some-
instruction or more extension?
You asked the question, what do we need to do for these kids, that little thing to push them forward more? What do we do, or what does this group do when you're trying to work with that one child that's almost
For
there?
just clarifying, just for ERQs or
Yes,
just instruction?
ERQs, or
For-
instruction in general, whichever one.
We'll talk about what we've done
Yeah,
this
the,
year.
the club
This,
size.
okay, I was just making sure I
I'm
was
sorry.
still focused on ERQs.
You're restating the question.
Yeah. Now I'd like to cite some evidence. The groups that we've done this year, we've actually, the four of us, revamped our whole schedule into focus groups and have pulled some kids who, we call them the brinkers, the ones that just might need a little bit of a push.
Right.
And are bringing them together. Miss Matson and I have been working together on reading because social studies is a lot of reading and a lot of vocabulary. So we've been focusing on kids and sharing strategies. We're reading some chapter books for Sarah Plain and Tall. If you've ever heard of books like this, we're reading them and they have a little bit of a social studies background, the Western Plains, Great Plains, but reading them as as readers and pulling the main idea and theme out. But then I'm talking about the social studies vocabulary, taking those kids that might not be participating in class or just kind of laying there,
Yep.
kind of pulling them in. And one important part is the connection that I've made with these kids.
There you go.
They're small groups. They're kids that might not always have their hand up. They're kids that aren't struggling, that I'm always checking in with them, but they're right there in the middle and talking to them. And I know we each math, writing and reading, and focusing on those groups. I love these groups.
Does the child stay with you all throughout the year, or
No.
Bridget has it so Bridget doesn't need to come?
Yes, they fluctuate.
They're fluctuating. Like we're just getting ready. I actually
Based on
told one of my groups yesterday that we finished a book, and I told them that we were going to be changing, and it was like, what? I thought we were going to pick a new book, and I said we are, but it's going to be some of you are going to stay, some of you are going to go, and it's really fluctuating. And they're but I've developed relationships with them now that I'll carry over into the classroom. That I can now say, remember when we talked about this? It actually came up on one of the proficiencies. They were talking about petticoats. It was petticoats, and we had read about petticoats in one of our Westward Diary of a Westward Boy, and they were like, I'm like, I heard it too. I heard it. Like it was just exciting.
This is over and beyond our RTI program. I mean, we have a very
Oh, yeah.
extensive RTI program that identifies our tier 2 and tier 3 students, and we have 4 certified teachers who work with kids. This is what my teams decided to do based on we have a lot of apprentice kids that just needed that additional. I said, well, what would that look like? What would you need? And 5th grade said, well, what we would need is small groups with those kids. So we need to have other kids in clubs and things like that. So we created even more clubs to give them those small groups. So from 3 to 3:30, you'll see my 5th grade teachers and my 3rd grade teachers working with small groups, and then the other kids are in clubs and doing all kinds of other things just to get that small focus group. So some kids actually receive RTI instruction.
I was just going to say, kudos to the kids.
and
Some kids are seeing
so-
3 times.
Well, we have ESS after school as well and before.
Right. So
Before
some of
and
our
after.
kids are putting in, 8-hour days where they are, and they're enjoying it.
They are enjoying
Because
it.
it's focused.
It is.
It's focused
It's not a
instruction.
general thing saying we're just going to teach them. It's what you need. Give them what they need, and hopefully, if we give them what they need, that they won't be with us for a long time. We have some kids that stay, but they're getting the support. And what if they didn't have the support every day?
Right.
So this is an opportunity for not kids, just advanced kids, but kids that just need that additional assistance.
Yeah.
I appreciate the question. As a parent, away from my job, I appreciate the question, and I'm sure the parents here appreciate that as well, for the kids that need more.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't think of it as extra. I mean, it's fun.
Right.
Well, I mean,
It's fun for us.
we have large groups that we're teaching every day, but to get a chance to actually sit down, I mean, I have an ECE background, and I mean, just that small group is very, I like to have my
It's
little
really nice.
chickens, and just kind of work with them, so.
Any other questions? I just have one question. And from a professional standpoint, how do you all struggle with, okay, you got to reach these proficiencies and things of that nature, but going back to your point earlier about, okay, I just need to make sure these kids get what they need to go to the next level, regardless of what acronyms they use.
Yeah.
Right.
So how do you talk a little bit about having that balance there?
Sure. Well, coming from a school that there was a lot of assessment, a lot of required assessments at my former school. We had to do the proficiency, but we also had to do diagnostics. We had to do, weekly formative assessments we had to bring, and so there was a lot of assessment going on. And in addition to that, those formative assessments are great because they tell you what your kids know and don't, but at the same time with those curriculum maps, they're really, really full and very rigorous. And so if you have those kids who need that extra attention and they can't get it, you're almost required to move on sometimes. I'm fortunate this school, we're great about not having as many assessments as could be. We don't have to do the diagnostics. Those are another additional 15 multiple choice question tests that, for reading would take 2 days probably, for math would take a day out of regular instruction, and you have to go over it. So for me, I think the assessments are good because it tells us what we have to do. I know exactly which kid needs what And so when we make those assessment groups, I think that, or those focus groups, the assessments are helpful. And so, there is always that struggle to, for those kids who need a little bit of extra help. And I think that luckily with these focus groups, I think that's helpful for us.
I think it's also important that, like, we teach the whole child. So it's not just these clubs. I mean, there's opportunities for these kids to do like life things here at school, and I think a lot of the parents could talk to that also. But just the opportunities they have to grow as people, not just as student learners. It makes a big difference. And then you talked about the relationships that you form with them in these small groups. I mean, that you all know relationships. That's the biggest part of education.
Well, the relationship with our related art teachers too. The librarian is fantastic, and she teaches economics through junior achievement. She took that on. I mean, that was part of my curriculum. That is an addition to U.S. history from dawn to now, and adding that economics part. That connection between her and the kids, and she can talk to me and talk about what's going on. And then with the technology, he's pulling programs that really support us in the classroom and are helpful. And then just thinking about, my second graders are in the Jungle Book, and she's pulling in the background and the culture and everything, and that well-roundedness of the kids that they can say, oh, that's what Mowgli did, or the natural environment, and bringing it into the classroom. So I think that the staff too really comes together for the whole kid to be able to say, oh, then we can focus in on our instruction, and then pull the focus groups later for double instruction.
Yeah.
And we really try, and that's a balance that we find. We don't try to, just be test centered, but we know that's what, the state, grades us on, and that's how, and parents want to know when they come in, what our rankings are. So we try to do both. We try to, have them that give opportunities. Like we have Chinese club, Latin club, they have chorus. These are things that are outside the core curriculum that kids can do from the 3 to 3:30 block. And what we like about it is the kids that can't stay, the kids that have to get on the bus, still have those opportunities to do after school things in school. But we also know, that testing is important. And, no matter how much, philosophically we disagree on testing, how much should be testing, that's how you get to college. You have to take the ACT. So if we're not doing anything but giving them those skills so they can be successful in, that correlation between what they're doing in the classroom and in how they're doing on tests, because that is ultimately a part of, how you get places these days. So just trying to do both of those, I think, is good. And one thing that we have here, I think that is important, is I don't have a lot of teacher turnover. So, even though these teachers look young, they have the hey, wait, they just playing with outside the table. I am truly offended.
And today's her birthday too.
But one of us looks young.
And but just having that stability, and that helps a lot, because what we're able to implement, we're able to continue, because like I tell people don't usually leave here. They might move around, switch grades, but they are still here, and so that helps a lot too.
I want to add too, because I want to make this clear. When we did these focus groups, we tried to make sure that kids were able to do the clubs that they wanted to do. So if a kid really wanted to go to Latin club on Monday, we made every attempt to get that kid in Latin club on Monday, and then maybe reading on Tuesday.
And with 140 kids, I don't know how.
You did.
We're going to talk about that next Monday. So we actually even I had said something about ask them, let them have a ranking, and we're going to try really to give them some input this time as well.
Because we know that the kids who are involved in a lot are typically the kids who are really successful in the classroom also. So we want to support that, and then encourage kids who don't want to do any clubs.
Well, I have people requesting to come to our focus groups. So
So
when they start ranking it, I'm going to be like, I don't know what to tell you, but you're reading on an 8th grade level.
But that just goes to show, how the culture that we've created, that they don't see that as being like, oh, no, I've got to go get extra.
Oh.
They want to come because they want to spend special time with their teacher. And I think that just speaks a lot about you guys and what you do in the classroom. So, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say that, first of all, I really enjoyed the dialogue back and forth, but I wanted to add that as a community educational presence, the beach, as I said, we're working right now with 2 of your students, is that we are willing to really partner with you to be an extension, say like downtown, of what's going on here, for example, book clubs. We have certified teachers there that work, and that, you know, the students will bring their homework. But for example, we did kindergarten readiness, and we went over the exact standards of the Brigance test, and so we know exactly where we needed to focus, creating a individualized education plan for each student, so that we the upper, lower case letters or whatever it is. But I think it's great. For example, if you know that, you know, they're going to come to us in the evening, that and you say, hey, Rose or Miss Livingston, whatever, you know, we're working on this. It would be great if you could reinforce that, because our main focus as well is that relationship with the parents. And I've heard, you know, really, you know, good things about, you know, that's the focus for you all too, the relationship with the parents. So I just think, you know, talk about the village, that, you know, we can be a Stopher West for you.
We'll make sure you get those names.
Yes. Would that be okay to share that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And we can work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
great.
Appreciate that.
So I will end and then hand it over to Dr. Owens. The reason we do PLC rounds parents is for one reason. This will never make the front page, this will never be in the news, but this is the work that should be. There's teachers doing this, and Bridget can attest, in every school right now, working on how to close the gap. That's not pretty, that's not attractive, so it doesn't get the credit it should. But this is the work that's really happening inside JCPS in all schools to close this thing called the gap. So I was charged to get community members. Sometimes we have 50, sometimes we have 5, but it doesn't matter. I was charged to get the community to see the real work that Dr. Owens and teachers are really doing. So parents, it's not the dog and pony show. They would do this if we're not here. That's the reason for a PLC round. So now, if Dr. Harkins was here, she would say you all are deputized to go out and say, well, actually, you know what? There's teachers actually sit not in a teacher's lounge and complain or do all that. There's teachers that are actually trying to figure out what about the one kid that needs more. And Bridget will tell you that's going on in every school right now inside of JCPS. So that's why we have it. So,
and this was only supposed to be 20 minutes, and I told them, and see, they just went on, because once you get started, you do have one question, and I'm gonna let you answer, and then we'll dismiss.
Yeah, I only have a second grader. That's the highest parenting experience I have.
Me too.
Forgive me if this is a silly question, but I did tutor middle school and high school math, and the biggest obstacle with getting them to improve was teaching them how to study.
So true.
Do you guys talk, because you do so much in the classroom, but do you talk about what to do when they go home? Because a lot of parents don't know how to study either. And so
the kids don't. I talk to them about that too. I have like their science notebook. They will have their notes, you know, for 6 or 8 weeks long, and then ideally, you know, I want them to go back and already have that together, and how, you know, so I'll go along and I'll say, okay, maybe this way you're going to abbreviate, or maybe you're going to put just a sticky note here. You're going to, you know, this is the best way to do that. Definitely, and how to kind of weed through lots of that information, and how can you put that into organization and the vocabulary, and maybe you're, you know, on the side you're saying, okay, that's my main idea, now I can come back to it, or and definitely with passage-based writing, you know, I'll say star that as you're going through, so you can go back and find your reasons, and you're not rereading again. So I do find myself doing that a lot because it helps me. I'm very visual. I will tell them if you need to see it.
I was just going to say the visual part of it. I always we close our eyes and picture the activity we did when we dressed up like the Inuit Native Americans, or when we dove down into the bottom of the classroom, into the bottom of the sea, and put on our scuba gear. So I said, close your eyes, and I, you know, listen to the bottom of the sea. What artifact did you pick up? And I tell them that visualization. Now look at it and visualize which part. It doesn't work for everyone, you know, and you have to have 19 strategies. That would confuse me. So you have to think about how, you know, teaching everyone to study a different way is hard to do, especially in the first 8 weeks of school or
it's
something.
almost like you have to identify
what their strength is and how they, and some people are, I mean, they're just as we are completely different.
I tell them to use what works for them. I will say, here's how I'm going to do this. Here's my diagram. I'm labeling. Here's what, you know, my column looks like and my notes, and you decide how it works for you. You know,
part of it is organization.
It is organization, but also this is a benefit too. It sometimes can be a negative, but they have 4 different teachers who have 4 different ways. That can sometimes be overwhelming for kids, but it also can show them 4 different ways to teach, study, learn, work together. I work in a lot of groups. There's a lot of, you know, how you learn. They might find their way, of which way is the best way that I learn, that I study, that I know how to organize my thoughts and visualize. So I think in this young age, it's coming up with their own strategy and seeing it in different ways.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
We're trying.
Well, thank you very much, and I know I've taken up your whole planning time, so I owe you royally. All right, thank
Tell me
you.
you want it back.